I'm right in your way, aren't I? Let's try to fix that. All right, hello friends. Thank you for joining me again today. Let's get everybody all on the same page here as quickly as possible. Getting there. Again, sorry for the little bit of hesitation there. Welcome, YouTube friends. YouTube is up and running, and Facebook is still, my Facebook camera is not quite as stout, shall we say, as my YouTube one, and thanks to Uncle 60, we have started a new fund to buy a better camera. This will be camera number 5 since I started. All right, let's get official. Some of you newcomers say, what's official mean? Official means I do the official clapper, which is Daily Art Adventure number 931. Late acrylic stages on a Rockwell-esque painting. Ready, set, go. So obviously I'm having some fun with the title there. Let me get my volume turned down a little bit so I'm not shouting in my ear. Sorry, and Facebook friends, we're still trying to get you dependable. Bear with me. Bear with me, YouTube friends, while we try to get Facebook friends up and running. If we can't get Facebook going, then we'll just proceed straight ahead with YouTube, people. I won't take time to tell you how frustrating it is. Yesterday everything worked just perfectly. Today everything's working terribly. All right, so painting, 3 girls. This is my client. This photograph, the scene, I didn't have a photograph. It's all made up out of my head. The scene is from 1981, and there are essentially 4 faces in the painting that are supposed to be fairly representational. Of course, the 3 girls, even though I don't have a photograph of them from this angle, it's an interpretation from other photographs from other angles. So those are 3 faces. And then the 4th one is the MC over here. All right, so that's the last time, perhaps, that I'll be drawing with that kind of detail or specificity. I was going to do this part here without your company, and then changed my mind because I think that for some of you watching me draw, and I'm assuming that you understand that drawing in the late stages of an oil painting, it's acrylics right now, but it's going to be oil, is not conventional. Okay, so first of all, don't be confused. No, most people do not draw like this with pencils in their painting. Okay, so that's unconventional. It's just a weird Dan Nelsonism developed over But the other thing that I want you to see is the manner which is it? The manner in which I am drawing. I am very much right-handed, even though I've been using my left hand to paint with for 11 or 12 years. I'm still very much right-handed, and as you can see right now, I am drawing with my left hand. So let that sink in for a second. If I'm right-handed, why am I drawing with my left hand? Well, I'm drawing with both hands, but why am I relying heavily on my left hand? One way to put it is because my right hand is very trained and controlled. My right hand does just what I tell it to. It almost always, it behaves very well. It puts marks down right where I want them. My left hand, on the other hand, sort of has a little bit of a mind of its own. I can't control it the same way. Now, I could control it. You know, I could do this, yeah, and control it pretty well, but that's the very thing that I don't want to do, even though I'm doing it here again, is do that kind of drawing, okay? So I opened a great big can of worms, shall I kind of call it that, yesterday afternoon when I was broadcasting. When I undertook to define beauty, well, not define it, but I began describing it just a little bit. And first of all, I asserted quite boldly, because I feel quite bold about this assertion, that in painting, beauty does not consist primarily in realism. Okay, realism is an element. In my opinion, it's a valuable or important element, even though sometimes, as you know, I do purely non-objective paintings. That's okay too. But I then said yesterday, so if beauty is not primarily circumscribed or defined by realism, then what is it defined by? What is it bounded by? And the answer I gave was familiar to all of those of you, probably surprising, but familiar to those of you who took even as much as a high school. Okay, hang on, she wants the name of the song up here on this. That's going to be quite the trick, but we'll start. Rocky Top is the name of the song that they're singing. So not a great surprise to anybody that's taken even as much as a high school art class. The primary creators of beauty are line, shape, design, value, texture, color. In other words, the elements of design. So it's all the abstract, and I could say the abstract elements of design. As you know, line, shape, color, design, value, texture have nothing to do with a picture of a girl. It has to do with the nature of the lines that I'm creating. So let me jump back to why, if I'm right-handed, am I doing a lot of drawing with my left hand? And the answer is because my left hand actually very often makes more interesting, you could even say, if you want to get dangerous, you could say makes more beautiful marks than my right hand, because my right hand is controlled, trained. It does what I tell it to. My left hand has a bit of a mind of its own. Anyway, that's just a little bit of review and then an explanation. So tell us, why again? Why do you use your wrong hand, your left hand? And that's part of it. This kind of stuff is all pretty typical for me. And it looks like we're not going to get our Facebook friends up and running at all. So bear with me. Well, as soon as I say that, then it starts to change its mind. So let's see if we can do it. All right, done with the pencils. Now I'm going to I think, two things before I move to oil. One is I'm going to draw with small brushes. What small is a relative term, of course. But I'm thinking these are filberts, size 4, size 2, size 1. So fairly small brushes so that I can make slightly detailed marks. All right, and I'm going to open my little acrylic pots, if you will. Well, let me show these to you, for anybody that's new that's watching. So these are food containers, purchased not at an art store, but at a kitchen store. And I just fiddled around till I found 9 little containers that would fit neatly in the big one. So I've since created several kits like this, and it's basically three primary colors, 3 secondary colors, plus brown, plus white. The one exception to that is in the blue category. I have 2 blues. I find I need 2 to get the job done. Phthalo blue, which is a warm blue, and ultramarine, which is a cool blue. And we have discussed many times over the years what's the difference between a warm and cool blue, and I'm not going to discuss it right now. I've done it many times, and no doubt I'll do it yet again. Still wrestling. Still trying to get my Facebook friends up and running. Forgive me, YouTube friends. And who's there? Someone's Homo sapien. Great name. Thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Glad, it's absolute bliss. My goodness, you can't get much higher compliment than that. Bless you. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for commenting. I have now a little bit of purple on my brushes, and purple and touch of ultramarine blue. So I'm just using it as a dark color, but rather than using like just a like black or brown or a neutral, muddy color. Whenever possible, I try to introduce color into the painting rather than anti-color. Does that make sense? The last thing that I'll do in acrylics, probably before I go to oil, when I'm finished with this layer, I'll do a second layer of white. I've already done one layer of white. By the way, how many layers on this painting so far? This is unusual painting because I did a very detailed drawing before I did anything. So I did pencil, then paint, then I did abstract on top of that, then I did white on top of the abstract, then I did colored glazes on top of that, then I did white at 6, the pencil was 7. So this is layer number 8, just to give you a rough idea. And that by layer, that includes like the pencil. It obviously doesn't cover much square acres, so to speak, but it's one of the stages, a very important stage, actually. So it's likely that this is number 8. It's likely that I'll do one more layer of acrylic, which will be number 9, which will be white details, light details. That would be 9. And then I switch to oil. And when I switch to oil, I will probably do about the same number of layers in oil. So 9 plus 9 would be 18 layers, which is pretty typical for me. 18 stages, 18 phases. All right, forgive me, I'm finally giving up forever on getting our poor Facebook friends. So thank you, Uncle 60, for starting a fund. If anybody wants to help me buy the next $400 camera, that would be great. Now, and I've lost my in-ear monitor, which is unfortunate. So the irony is that the camera worked perfectly yesterday. Just worked perfectly, and I haven't done a thing, haven't touched anything, haven't budged or wiggled anything, and today it's not working at all. Isn't it strange? So very strange indeed, and frustrating to say the least. Anyway, enough of that. Let's just pretend everything's going swimmingly. I have it over here somewhere. I have some photographs of microphone. There we go. This scene, this event is supposed to be, took place in 1980 or 1981. This is the girl for whom I am doing the painting. So that's her nearly 40 years ago. So she's a little bit older than that now. Still a lovely lady. Of course, I have to say that because she might be watching. I hope you've got a good sense of humor by that. I would say that even if you weren't watching. So this is quite an unusual assignment for me. And if you know me at all, you may know that I love unusual. I mean, it's just, that's, people often say, so what do you enjoy the most? And you know, in art, what medium do you enjoy the most? And depending how much energy, how much interest they have, the real answer to that question is I, by far, enjoy variety more than any one medium. So, sure, I'd have to say oil painting, which in my case includes acrylic painting. That's my favorite medium. But if you put a gun to my head and said, okay, for the rest of your life you can do nothing but oil paintings, I would consider myself significantly impoverished by such a restriction. So, for Bidet to ask me to do this unusual painting is a real treat for me. And as you see, I entitled it sort of a Rockwell-esque, although I have to make a very important caveat to that in just a minute. By Rockwell, Norman Rockwell, I mean it's a bit of nostalgia, it's a bit of Americana, it's a scene, it tells a story. Okay, so the story is real simple: is 3 young teenage girls singing on a television telethon, we call it here in America, a fundraiser for muscular dystrophy, or I forget now. I forget Bidet. I'm sorry. I'll look up. It's in our notes. She's told me what it was for, but I'm forgetting here at this moment. Let me go back to talking about, like I was with when I was doing pencils. I'm still using purple or purple-ish paint on my brushes, and again, that's just not because these objects that I'm painting are purple. I'm just using purple as a darkness. Okay. If you are a painter, I hope I'm puzzling you. Let me explain that. So I often think of some of you who might be watching me, and you watch me paint, and you say, yeah, that's what I would have done. And then I laugh at you. Nicely, of course, in a friendly manner. But I laugh at you because I know perfectly well that most of what I do is not at all what you would do. And we're all different. We're not all supposed to do the same thing. When I started doing fine arts painting, which is really only 16 years ago, I did not set out to be a weird painter. I didn't say, by golly, I'm going to paint weird. Not at all. It's just that's how my journey has evolved. In fact, I'm teaching a class this coming November at Art of the Carolinas. If any of you if you're an artist and you want to have a fun event, artsy event to come to, just get online and look at Art of the Carolinas 2020. I'm teaching in one of the classes. I teach pretty much every year there, and one of the classes I'm teaching is how to paint in the weird Dan Nelson way. So I got right to the chase. It remains to be seen whether anybody signs up for the class. I have to come up with new titles every year, and I never know if people are going to be drawn to it or not. But anyway, I am teaching a class, how to paint in the weird Dan Nelson way. Let me go back just a minute, again, in case there's anybody new watching. I told you just a minute ago that I started doing fine arts painting about 16 years ago. That's true. Do not be confused by that. Let's be honest here. I was a full-time professional artist for decades before that. So I'm not a new painter. I'm just a new fine arts painter and a new oil painter. But literally for decades before that, I worked basically in every medium except oil paints. And now oil paint is my primary medium. So again, just in case somebody new is watching, I don't want you to think that I've been an artist for 16 years. I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, there's people that are better than I who've painted 16 years or less, but not many. Anyway, I'm going to go back to I started mentioning a few minutes ago yesterday, with much either folly or courage, ventured to enter upon a conversation, a rather philosophical conversation about beauty and what is beauty. And yesterday I used the terminology, and even as I was using it, I knew that I was going to be triggering some people, and I do apologize for that. It's not my goal to be, to alienate me from you or you from me. I said that, and I gave a lot of preamble to it, which I will not repeat right now. I'm somewhat versed on the subject, the classical official study of aesthetics. Okay, I'm not speaking out of ignorance to the history, the official academic discipline of aesthetics. So if there's any true aestheticians listening, please understand that I know I'm going against the tide. I talked about that yesterday. That's enough. All right. But yesterday I said that I believe that beauty is in fact a reflection. Now, this is the language I use today. I think that beauty is an objective reality that exists outside of human beings. It's not a subject purely. It is subjective, but it's not a purely subjective reality. That it is an objective. It reflects, I should say, an objective reality. And then I added one more word, and this is the word that would trigger some folks. I said I believe that beauty is a reflection of an objective, real, out there exists, transcendent reality. And that's the word, the verbiage that I knew would, again, forgive me, trigger some of you, but I'm going to plow forward, triggers and all, okay? And as I continued to reflect on that yesterday after I finished broadcasting, I thought, wait a minute, let's go back, let's revisit that a little bit. And I'm going to use some other terminology that perhaps a little bit, at least, will de-trigger some of my precious listeners. Hang on, I'm doing some stuff now. I pretty much need to think what I'm going to. So hang on, I'm going to come back to alternate terminology in a minute, but let's talk about painting for just a minute. And I said in the title to this that this is a Rockwell-esque painting, and then I said I need to come back and revisit that in a while. So let's do that right now. Okay, so it's Rockwell-esque in that it's a story. It's a picture. It's a real picture. Some of you regulars know that usually I'm kind of ranting against picture, and I'm mispronouncing the word on purpose. Again, for those of you who English is your second language, the word is picture, P-I-C-T-U-R-E, but I'm mispronouncing it on purpose just because I'm ornery. No, I'm mispronouncing it on purpose to kind of exaggerate the fact, if you will, that beauty in a painting does not consist primarily in the picture, mispronounced, picture elements. So this painting is not going to be like a Rockwell painting in that it's going to be much less picture-y, picture-ish. I'm going to try to, let me just jump to the chase. So these faces, these girls' faces in particular, need to be fairly abstract. Okay, so not tight, like right now they're too They are much too realistic and accurate. So in that regard, it's not going to be like a Rockwell painting. I'm going to try to make the faces accurate but messy. Or again, my favorite term is abstract realism, and the abstract is more important than the realism. All right. Whew. So that's why you see me, I'm trying to make marks on their faces that are not just realistic. All right? All right, that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. We'll come back to that later. Let's get back then to the discussion of beauty. Beauty is an objective reality, in my opinion, and I've come to that, and I might change my mind in 10 years, but I've gone back and forth on it over the decades a number of times, and this is my latest thinking, and I think it's the best thinking. All right, so instead of using the term transcendent reality, though, I'm going to just cite C-I-T-E. I'm going to cite Plato. Yeah, Plato, not Play-Doh. Plato. So some of you, you'll have never studied Plato. I understand that. So, but most of you, if you got a liberal arts degree in college, then you had to take a philosophy course, and in week number 1, at least week number 2 of your philosophy course, you'd studied Plato. And so I'm going to give you a quick review of Plato. Remember, the man in the cave facing the back of the cave, the opening of the cave is behind him. There are things happening out behind him outside the cave, but all he can see is the reflections of those things in front of him. Does that ring a bell? That's Plato. Now let me explain what Plato was saying with that word picture. He was saying that all the things we see with our 5 senses, all the things that we experience in the space-time continuum. He didn't use that language, of course. That's more astrophysics language now. But everything that we experience that can be measured scientifically, those things are actually reflections, or manifestations would be a better word, manifestations of absolute, ultimate, universal realities. Some of you are gagging because I'm taking you back to college philosophy class, which you hated. Ironically, I didn't like it much either. I took it my sophomore year of college, and it was the 9 o'clock class, which meant I'd been up till 1, 2, or 3 o'clock in the morning, either studying or horsing around, most of the time studying. And I had an 8 o'clock class, so I could pry myself out of bed, get to an 8 o'clock class. But by the time 9 o'clock got there, I just couldn't keep my eyes open. It was impossible. So I went through my entire philosophy course with one eye half closed and the other eye all the way closed. So I did not love philosophy when I was a college student. Pretty funny, because I've turned, as I've grown up, I've turned out to be, what's the word? Amateur. That'd be one word. That means I love philosophy. Quite the student of philosophy, if you will. Of course, I don't want to say I'm a philosopher, because then anyway, never mind. I would bring down the wrath of, say, Berkeley philosophy department on my head if I was so bold and stupid as to say I'm a philosopher. But compared to most people on the street, I'm a philosopher. Anyway. So Plato says all the stuff we see. Now, and before you scoff too loudly and say, that's stupid, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Well, hang on. Not a good initial reaction. hang on here just a second. Let me do some more. Let me give you a real simple example, an illustration of this Platonic, not in the usual sense of the word, Platonic philosophy. Let me get where you can see the corner of this canvas. All right, you see the corner of this canvas right here, right? You know, without me telling you, you know that that corner is a 90-degree angle. Now, if we got some kind of super, hyper, ridiculously accurate, you also know this, some kind of accurate machine out here that could measure to the 10,000th of a degree, we'd find out that it's off by a few 10,000ths of a degree. You get it? But would that bother us? Not at all. In fact, if we were to do such a thing, we'd just be like kids with a microscope, just playing, right? Because everybody knows those are all 90-degree angles. Now here's Plato. You not only do you see it, you know it, you intuit, you understand, you know what maybe if you didn't even know what the word 90, letter 90 degree means, you know that's a corner. It doesn't even faze you, doesn't even irritate you, bother you. It's like, yeah. In fact, if I turned my camera around, you'd see I'm in a room. Virtually every corner in this room, except for the molding up at the top is some fancy angle, I'm surrounded. There are tens of thousands, literally, counting every little slat in the blind. I'm surrounded by 10,000, let's say, 90-degree angles. Everywhere I look. Same at your house. Same exactly at your house. And Plato would shrug and say, see, I told you. The 90-degree angles you see in your house or my house are merely a physical manifestation of a universal reality. The universal reality is called 90-degree angles. It's not even called that. It's a concept of 90-degree angles, right? And just because some of them are off by millimeters wouldn't faze us a bit. Now, if they were off a whole bunch, then that would faze us. So hang on just a second. I think I'm done doing color. So bear with me just a minute. I'm going to close up all my little containers and the last thing I'm going to do is white acrylic, and then I'll be done. So hang on. I'll keep talking though. So there is another way to put it. There's the concept of 90-degree angles. So I'm just using one silly little simple thing, 90-degree angles. There's the concept, and the specific manifestations or examples that we see of 90-degree angles all are accurate, understandable reflections, indicators, manifestations of the concept of 90-degree angle. Does that make sense to you? Now let me push this a little bit more. What would happen if you stepped into a room? By the way, somebody's over here is chatting up a storm. Somebody from China or Korea or Japan. Bless you. Good to have you here. Hello, Brenda. Yeah, I'm starting a little earlier today. Isn't that nice for some of you? I'm trying to decide where to go from there. I've got so many different directions I could go. I'm not sure where to go first or next. So, the manifestation of literal 90-degree angles is a reflection of a concept, a principle, an idea. Widely ascribed to in the Western world, especially in things like architecture and physical things like canvases, right? You expect things in your world, like in your house, for instance. You expect most of the things in your house to reflect, to yield to come in under submission to trying to think of different ways to say it. You expect almost everything in your house to line up with the universal principle of 90-degree angle. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit crazier than that. Let's say you're shopping for a house. And you walk into a house, let's just say some crazy house I can't imagine, but on the outside, everything, because you walk in, if the outside looked like this, you'd never walk in. Let's say on the outside, everything looks normal. Looks like a typical, you know, the kind of structure that's been built in the last 10,000 years by human beings. If it's not round, if it's squarish, it yields, it submits, it lines up with the universal abstract principle of squareness. We might even use that word, everything's square. But if you were to walk in the house and discover that every angle, the door frames, the window frames, the floors, was off enough, I don't mean by micro, I mean off enough so that when you walk in, it's like, whoa, whoa, that's what you would say, or something like that. You would, first of all, you'd notice it. So I'm talking about an offness enough. Now I'm not saying, by the way, that, well, maybe this house on the inside, it was built on, you know, a hexagon. What's that? A 30-degree angle? 360 divided by 6 is 60. Yeah, let's say, I don't mean, because if you walked into the inside and instead of being built on the square, this particular house was built on the beehive shape, the 60-degree angles, you'd say, wow, that's interesting. But you wouldn't be shocked, dismayed, you wouldn't run out. I'm talking about a house that it's built, so to speak, generally on the idea of a 90-degree angle, but rather than being 90 degrees, every angle is 87, 85, 83, 80 degrees, like off enough that you can see it. By the way, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's any C.S. Lewis fans out there, but the example, and I'm not telling the story because of him, but all of a sudden my mind goes, wait a minute. Okay, C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, has a series of stories called the Space Trilogy, and in the final book of the Space Trilogy, it's called That Hideous Strength. There is a scene, and I'm going by ancient memory. I read this book when I was a young man, decades ago, so I may be getting the details wrong. But as I remember it, the primary protagonist in this story, he'd been captured by the bad guys, and they were going to try to make him go insane. So this is exactly what they did, what I just said to you. They put him in a room where everything was a little bit off. Like the top of the door frame, instead of being level, 90s, it was like, but just a little bit off, just enough so you could see it. And their idea, the bad people, and this is C.S. Lewis, who is a genius at putting heavy and deep philosophical concepts into story form. That was his. Chronicles of Narnia is his also. Forgive me, I know I'm triggering some of you again. You need to do something about that trigger. But anyway, never mind. I jest, sort of. So in the story, in C.S. Lewis, That Hideous Strength, they put this man, I forget his name, Ransom, right? His name was Ransom. They put him in a building, a house, a room, where everything was a little off, and they were trying to make him go crazy. As I remember the story, they missed their mark because instead of causing Ransom, the hero of the book, to go crazy, it had quite the opposite effect. By observing everything being off, instead of making him go, this is crazy. Bear with me, I'm not telling the story very well. Instead of making him go crazy, it made him go, no, the offness of everything in here proves to me that Plato was right. Now, that's my language. I'm not sure that Lewis cites Plato in his book, but he certainly could have. And Ransom could have said, I don't think he did, but he could have said, everything that I'm seeing here, instead of making me think I'm crazy, it makes me think you guys are crazy, and there actually are objective, so here's where we're getting back to beauty. There actually are objective, measurable, real, not touchable, because we're talking invisible realities, but the concept of square, 90-degree angles, is actually a real universal principle. And the violation of that principle in this story proves to him that the universal truth was universal. Boy, I said that poorly. Can you untangle that for me? So let me go back to the definition of beauty. I believe, and I might be wrong, goodness knows I've been wrong about enough things over the decades, but at the moment I think this is accurate, that beauty is an objective manifestation of universal principles. By the way, let me go back to Plato for just a minute. Again, and some of you are saying, well, that's stupid. No, if that's the way you're feeling, then that's all right. You're just not a philosopher. Don't worry about it. Go home, watch football, drink a beer, and you're just fine. Don't give it any more thought. And if you want to cuss and curse about how stupid we are on your way out the door, then that's your prerogative. In fact, that's probably your style. Now that was a snarky comment right there, just in case you missed it. So you cussin', snarling, troll-ish creatures, go ahead, cuss and snarl and be a troll. Don't let the door hit you in the behind on the way out. Again, I'm just saying that in response to the people saying, hey, the scoffers. There's always going to be scoffers among us. God put scoffers on the planet to test the rest of us, to test our character. Let me restate that, because I know we just triggered a bunch of people. Okay, evolution put a bunch of snarky, troll-ish creatures in the human race so as to create an upward evolutionary momentum driven by our choice, some of us, our choice to transcend the noise and dirt and what's the word? It's a word I'm looking for. Never mind. Of the scoffers world. Okay. Once again, I know I'm triggering some of you. That's just trigger warning. That's one of my. Some people say, at the beginning of their podcast, or they're I'll have to put that on my trigger warning here. Let's get back to beauty, a reflection of objective reality. So, when I say that line, shape, color, design, value, and texture, the elements of design, are reflections of transcendent realities, I could also say they are reflections of Plato-esque, ultimate, universal realities. There are certain lines made with a pencil, say, that are attractive to the human mind, and other lines, not so much. I could demonstrate. I'm not going to right now. There are certain color combinations. So, here's where the rubber is starting to meet the road. There are certain color combinations in certain contexts that the human eye would find winsome, attractive. We'd be drawn. We would experience a sense of beauty. There are certain textures, and everything here I'm saying has to be in context. And I'm not saying they're like I can't say, okay, like someone, a scoffer would say, well, okay, smarty pants, so tell me what color is beautiful. No, 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 no. There's not a color or a texture or a line or shape that's beautiful. Everything has to be in tension, in connection with everything else. And then in that full-orbed, say in this case, two-dimensional space, there are certain things that are beautiful and certain things that are not. So that's, boy, we went deep, didn't we? I hope that made some sense to you. Let me do one of my favorite things, since I'm ranting and raving. Let me take a whack at one of my favorite whipping post boys, which is, quote unquote, modern art. In this context, in that sentence, I'm using modern like a man on the street, like an ordinary person. I'm not using it like an academic. So you academics, zip it. I'm talking about what most people call, modern art. Everything basically that happened in the 20th century. Here's an interesting reality I want to suggest to you. By the way, hang on, just let me think here. Okay, here's an interesting reality. So there are the great majority of prominent artists, prominent modern artists, because only the modern artists were prominent in the 20th century. Everybody else was laughed off the playing field. If you don't know that, I'm sorry you don't know history. All of us realists were like half-witted, dim-witted, Luddites, according to the academy, the art academy, the art establishment in the 20th century. Those of us who continued to do realism, especially beautiful realism, like I try to do, were considered antiquated, benighted, obscurantist, Luddites. Look it up. And again, some of you don't even know that. I mean, I've shared some of this with people who are not in the art world, and I've had them go, well, golly, I didn't know that. I'm assuming all of you know that what I'm telling you is the truth. If you don't, welcome to the world. All right, here's a funny principle. And this for me is one that just this little story is one of the strongest arguments against the foundational tenets of modern art. Again, contemporary, modern, whatever you want to call it. I'm just using the term in the general sense. Many, if not most, of the big shots of modern art in the 20th century produced what most people would say was ugly. In fact, as I like to say, ugly. That means really ugly. Most of the big shots hang on. Most of the big shots of modern art produced paintings that would cause most people to say, my 5-year-old could do that, right? You've heard that, you've said that, you've thought it, and you're correct. All right, now, most of the defenders, I'm not a defender, but neither am I'm not an attacker either. I'm going to try to be, in the book that I'm writing, the one that's 400 pages long, I'm going to try to be fair to those people. Be fair and acknowledge what is good, but not, in my opinion, not all of it was good. So most of the art produced by most of the big names, and I'm not even going to start naming names because I'll leave some off, and then you'll say, oh, you're an idiot, you didn't mention Picasso or whatever, So I'm just not going to name names. Erase that name I just mentioned. Most of them produced distinctly dark, troubling, unattractive art. Okay? And just to give a little bit of explanation, the art establishment, that is the universities, the municipal art museums, the people who are card-carrying, Kool-Aid drinking members of the art establishment, they take that ugly work and they'll say, oh, it's so honest. It's honest. That's one of the words they use to explain or excuse ugly work. Now, I'm going to take a real quick tangent and come back, but here's why they call it honest. Because and I'm going to be blunt and quick, and I'm painting with too broad of a brush. They believe you and I and the whole world and the whole human race is screwed. We believe, and if I used a stronger word, you'd get more of the accurate feeling. You know what word I'm talking about. They really believe we are just damned. We're just damned. We're a disaster from beginning to end, and we're going to end as a disaster. They believe that's reality. Now, there's a reason, a historical, philosophical, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid. There's a reason they believe all that, and I'm not mocking them for that belief. I just happen to have a different one, okay? But they believe we're truly all screwed. And so when an artist produces really dark, dreary, depressing, screwed artwork, they go, now that's honest. They hate, and I'm not exaggerating here, they literally hate. They'd rather put ice picks through their eyes than to be forced to look at a painting that someone created trying to create beauty, okay? They really do hate it. They're not pretending. I mean, I know these people. I went to college with these people. I've interfaced with them for decades. They really do hate beauty and all attempts. But they love ugly because they believe it's honest. I had a fellow artist talk to me one time. We were having a great time. We were painting at a art event, and she brought me into her studio, and she showed me a book of an artist I'd never heard of. I said, oh yeah, that's nice. And most of it was really nice. And then there was some part of the book that this guy that could paint beautiful paintings went into way ugly. Okay, I'm going to keep talking, but I have to go to the garage and get my oil paints. Hang on. Well, I won't keep talking because I'm afraid I'm going to drop out here any second. Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I'm now out of the garage because we have our big freezer is in the garage, and I keep my my oil paints in the freezer, right? You know that trick, right? So they don't dry. So the same people, the same artists that create but ugly artwork because, well, mostly because they want to be in the cool crowd. They want to be in with the cool cats. And the cool cats, the professors, museum, people with the MFAs and so forth, all adhere, basically, essentially adhere. I'm speaking too broadly because, again, because I want to get through this and I want to stay stuck here. They, while I'm talking, I'm going to go dump out my water. I'm switching over to oil here. So bear with me just a minute. So the very artists who create ugly art do you like that sound? The same modern artists who create ugly art because they believe it's honest, if, count their lucky stars, they hit it big and they actually get a bit of a name for themselves and their artwork starts selling for decent money. So now I want you to imagine a modern artist, quote unquote, again using the term in the generic sense of the word. I want you to imagine a modern artist who paints ugly, dark, depressing, abstract. It doesn't have to be abstract, but just let's say artwork. All of a sudden, he is this big, and his paintings start selling for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a piece. We actually have one of those here, right here in Raleigh. Certainly won't name his name, but he's probably the highest-selling artist in my hometown, and that describes him exactly. He does amazingly amazingly ugly paintings. I mean, it's a real skill at being able to create something that is so avoids any semblance of beauty. It's amazing. And he's hit the big time. He sells in New York, and he gets $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a painting. Here's the funny part. lucky for him. I'm sure he's very happy, and I bless him. I wish him the best. What does he do with money? Well, let's say he buys a car. He's got money now. He's got $100,000 cash from selling ugly artwork. He wants to buy a car. Do you know what kind of car he buys? You know where I'm going with this, don't you? Does he buy a car that comports with his emphatically stated philosophy of life and art? The ugly is real, we're all screwed, damned, cursed, F-bombed. My art reflects that. No, he does not, does he? In fact, if he pays $100,000 for a car, what does he want the car? He wants the finish to be perfect, not like his paintings. He wants the door to close perfectly, not like his paintings. He wants the roof to keep the rain out because of it's sealed, not like his paintings. He wants the tires to be perfectly round, just like you do on your car, not like his paintings. He wants the gear shift. He wants every single screw and every single bit of fiber and leather and wood and steel and titanium and gasoline and oil. Every molecule in his car he wants perfect because he's paying good money for that car. You see the irony there? Let's say he wants to buy a house, and we've already been talking about houses. This imaginary person that I'm describing wants to buy a house. By the way, I'm going to start moving to oil here in just a minute. So let me, while I rant. This is not a rant, by the way. This is a lecture. There is a difference. Hang on. A rant is when I'm just blowing off steam because I'm irritated or something. This is not that. Now, I know very well that I'm going against the tide. Believe me. Oh boy. I know I'm going against. So if you have an MFA degree, you're hating everything I'm saying right now because you're a professional. You have drunk the Kool-Aid that they fed you at the university. Bless your heart. I'm not cursing you or looking down on you, but I am disagreeing with what 99% of what you were taught in the academy. So let's say the same person, a modern artist who creates the kind of work that the normal man on the street, woman on the street, when they walk into the museum or the gallery, they go, I don't get it. My 5-year-old could do that. That kind of artwork. You know what I mean? That's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It is the predominant kind of artwork being done in the entire Western world right now. Once again, I'm coming counter to essentially the entire Western world. And again, my chutzpah may indeed just flabbergast you. And that's all right. That's all right. I'm used to being flabbergastery. So let's say this man or woman who paints dark, depressing, ugly, 5-year-old artwork, but sells for $10, $20, $30, $100,000 each, say, and they make so much money they want to buy a house. Let's go back to being real dumb and simple the way I was being an hour ago. They walk into their house. It's been built for them. They paid $1.5 million cash for this house. What do they want? They want the squares to be square, the flats to be flat, the rounds to be round. They want the bricks right. They want the stucco right. They want the plumbing right. They want the electricity right. And I contend that that is their true person. I contend that all the stuff that they flap about when they're talking about their art, the stuff that's in the museum that's written on the, it's like 200-300 words describing this thing you're looking at, that's not the real them. That's the put on them. That's the poser them. That's what they learned in art school, and that's what they learned in their culture. But the real them is the one that buys the house. And when they buy the house, they contradict and belie everything that they just said in their art statement. Here's another funny example of that. about 30, 40 years ago. Braniff Airlines, no longer in existence, I don't think, but it was a pretty big airline back in the day. Braniff Airline. By the way, I'm going to start glazing this in oil. Now I can glaze and talk at the same time. And yeah, mostly warm stuff. So a little bit of Indian yellow, a little bit of oxide red, which of course is like burnt sienna, kind of a brownish, orange-ish brown. Braniff Airlines, back in the 70s. They made a marketing decision. They thought it would be cool to hire one of the hottest hotshot modern artists on the planet at the time. It would be cool to hire Alexander Calder, with whom I happened to be very familiar at the time because I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Grand Rapids, Michigan is the home since the 60s or early 70s, I think late 60s, is the home of one of the major Calder stables, as opposed to a mobile. You can look them up if you want. And again, by the way, I don't think Alexander Calder, I don't think, does not fit the description of ugly art. It's very abstract, very non-objective, but I think he was striving after beauty. I hope I'm understanding Calder. His sculptures were abstract but beautiful. But anyway, Braniff Airlines hired Alexander Calder to design designs to go on their jets, on their 727s, 37, 47, 50, whatever it was, their big passenger airlines, okay? And so for a while, all the Braniff Airlines had, you can probably Google this, you can probably just, Braniff, B-R-A-N-I-F-F, Alexander Calder, C-A-L-D-E-R. You can probably just Google that and hit images, and you can see, I haven't checked it out, I'm just guessing that you can do that. You could see the Braniff Airlines airplanes with Alexander Calder artwork on them. Now, here's what's funny about that. Even though, as I said, Alexander Calder was not part of the cult of ugly, he was cozying up to that edge of the spectrum, completely abstract. The irony is that if Braniff had built their airplanes according to the philosophy of reality reflected by Alexander Calder's designs, their airplanes would never have gotten off the ground. Okay, in order for airplanes to fly, there's a whole bunch of order. There's the word. See, order, 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 order. That's why airplanes fly. It's, everything in our life works because some scientist, engineer, designer, person somewhere in the dim and dark past, or in the recent, like say with cell phones, in the recent past, some scientific designer followed order. At the same time that, let's say, so I'm changing stories here slightly. Let's just say that at the same time that somebody over at the Apple Macintosh Research and Development Building, at the same time that somebody over there is designing the latest, greatest iPhone, all the art departments in all the universities in all the Western world are reflecting a reality that there is no order. And when the young student MFA artists get out of their art class, where they've been, forgive me, vomiting forth this philosophy of nihilism, atheistic existentialism, naturalism, it's the real term, one that posits that there's no such thing as order, order, order. Like when I'm talking about universal realities, they've been painting all day long under the influence of their professor and then under the influence of each other in order to be cool in the in crowd. Not like me. I would get scorned out of the, I mean, oh my goodness, they would, like I said, they'd rather put ice picks in their eyes than be forced to look at my paintings. So that all day long, they're living in an environment that posits, that proposes, that teaches, that believes that objective reality is a fallacy and a fakery and a lie. They believe beauty is a lie. But as soon as they walk out of their class, what do? They pick up their cell phone and they talk on their smartphone, which is an absolute dials up their phone is the real person. The stuff they spout off, reflecting what their professors have told them, the stuff they spout off in their art class is not the real person. That's the twisted, fakery person. That's the poser. That's the one. Golly, if I want to be in the in crowd. Now I know I'm being a little bit harsh here, partly because I don't have time to make the obvious caveats for every single statement that I'm making. Does that make sense? That there are exceptions, in a sense, to every statement I'm making. And yeah, sure, feel free to leave me in the comments, but I don't obligate myself to pay a lot of attention to them because I know that's true. I'm not stupid. I know that nothing is as simple as I'm making it sound, but I'm trying to get this just the way the philosophy professor does, the art philosophy professor does in class. You know, they have to get through a certain amount of material by the end of the class. That's the way I'm acting right now. That's why my book is 400 pages long. It's unpublished so far, unedited even. It's just raw material. But anyway, I hope, because I know I've tried to just driven more than half of you absolutely bonkers crazy. Say, enough of this, get away. Okay, forgive me. I don't really like to drive people bonkers, but I hope there's somebody out there that needed to hear some of what I'm saying. Maybe an art student or somebody who's thinking about becoming an art student. By the way, when I run into a young high school kid who's gifted at art, no, I tell them, do not major in art. Do not. If you want to be an artist, do not go to the university. I do, and there's no question. If I could snap my fingers and make every art department in the world in the typical university disappear, I would do it, because I think that it's essentially a blight on humanity. Because they didn't teach me how to paint. In fact, they quite discouraged, skill. I went to a really good school. I really did. I went to a really good school with a really bad art department. And it's possible that somewhere, sometime, somebody from that school is actually going to hear me say this and be a little bit upset. And I say, please bring it on. Please bring it on. I can get it. Okay. All right. So I've just done a glaze, as you probably can see. First I did warm over the whole thing, yellow, orange, brown over everything. Then I did dark blue and purple in the corners to vignette it. So the overall painting, as I hope you can see, is working much better as a painting now. It's more than just an illustration. Again, kind of in keeping with the topic of the day, it's beginning to reflect. Ultimate realities. What do I mean by that? The colors are interesting. The focus of light here is interesting. Now the story, there's no question that this is a representational, or one might say a realistic painting. Now it's not hyper realistic, but there's no question that it's realism, right? Right. And the realism is an element in the beauty. By the way, I didn't make that clear a little while ago when I was sort of railing against when I say
realism is not the primary purveyor or instrument of beauty in a painting. It's not, but it is an element. And by saying that, once again, I'm going completely against the Academy in that, because for a century now, the Academy, the university art department has said, no, that realism is a detriment, that we do not want to do any realism. And again, if you're not an artist, you don't know this necessarily. If you're an artist, and you love the Academy, then you're saying, that's not true. Yeah, I know there's exceptions, but by and large, I know whereof I speak. And the Academy, every time I give a talk like this, I have a number of people who did major in art in the Academy, in university or college, and say, yep, everything you said is exactly. I mean, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard to know what's going on, so to speak, in the Academy. All right, and this broadcast has gone on plenty too long. I don't know if anybody's saying anything. Yes, Uncle, you're missing a big lecture. Big lecture. Oh, Uncle, that's a good, hard question. Hello, Mystery Secrets. Good to have you speak up. Yeah, bad art and bad doctors. That's right. That's another example. If somebody makes, sells enough paintings that they can afford to get medical care, they absolutely do not want a doctor that believes what they believe as an artist. They want a doctor who believes that there is such a thing as objective reality. If you cut off someone's head, it's going to be bad for their health. Being a little bit silly. I'm being way silly. But anyway, yeah, good example. Yeah, Uncle, you can go back. You can go back and listen to it later if you really want. But I'm in the mood. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I said, you know what? I'm going to unload in a more direct way. Usually I kind of play my cards a little close to my chest, but I'm not doing that today. I'm just letting it all out there and saying, okay, here's what I really think. Beauty is an objective reality. It's a reflection of ultimate or universal principles. Yesterday I said transcendent realities, which I knew would trigger some of you, and I do apologize for that. I don't do that on purpose, but let me get a little bit practical. So as an artist, unless you're part of the modern art, again, I'm using that term not the way an academic would, so you guys, you philosophers with degrees, don't come back and say, me. No. I'm just using the word modern the way ordinary people would. All right, so unless you're part of that world, if you're part of my world where you're trying to create beautiful paintings, then the more absolute, universal, objective, transcendent rules, I'm going to use the word rules now, that you know, the better painter you'll be. When I look at somebody, go back, let's say Rembrandt. When I look at a Rembrandt and I go, dang, he is so good. Let's just say, for instance, why is he good? Why is there something rising up deep within me that is a mystery? Believe me, I can't explain it all. But why do I have that sensation of beauty? My answer is because Rembrandt knew even more rules than I do. He knew how to comport himself, the movements of his hand and his brush and his paint and his color and line and shape, design, value, texture, in alignment with invisible, ultimate, absolute realities. Get Plato. And because of his knowledge I remember one time, I think it was about 3 years ago, give or take. And I don't know, I think I was on a computer. I might have been on my phone, I don't remember, but I was flipping through images on my computer or my phone. And a Rembrandt portrait, not a self-portrait, it was a Rembrandt portrait of somebody else. If it's not a self-portrait, it's a portrait of somebody else. Golly, the guy's clever. This a little, I'm being a little bit transparent here. I was flipping, and I would say my soul, invisible, the real me inside me, was in a certain resting, receptive place, peaceful place. And this image flashed up on my screen. And it would be an exaggeration to say I burst into tears. That would be an exaggeration, but that's the way it felt. The literal truth was, tears sprang to my eyes. I didn't gush and boo-hoo. That would be an exaggeration. I completely shocked me, completely surprised me, like, boy, where did that come from? I think it was on a phone, but I'm like this, so it's a pretty big picture, so to speak. And it's like, boom. I don't remember which one, but tears came to my eyes. I experienced like a wash over my inner real self and experienced a sensation, a feeling of beauty. Some philosophers and scientists would say that's purely subjective. The beauty rests inside your being. That's where you feel it. It is nothing out there, and that's what I'm denying. That's what I'm saying. No. I believe that I experience it because it's a reflection of a reality that exists objectively outside of me. And that's one of the most stark experiences I've ever had of being surprised by beauty. And as artists, then our job is to figure out, I'll use that case. Dang. What did Rembrandt know that I'm just barely grasping the edge of his garment, to use another Western civilization word picture. And that's my job, to try to figure out what is he doing? What did he do in that painting? And it's not realism. We've established that. Of course, Rembrandt, it's not hyper-realism. Although the anatomy was correct. Of course, it goes without saying. The drawing has to be correct. Otherwise, it irritates people like crazy. What was it? It was line, shape, value, design, texture, edges. All different kinds of verbiage we could add to that list if we get into the principles of design. The elements of design, 6 or 7. The principles of design, infinite. You can, tension is one of my favorite words. Energy is one of my favorite words. Various degrees, pockets of degrees of energy covering the whole canvas. That's an abstract. So that's where beauty, I believe, beauty is objective. And again, please understand, I know that I'm at odds with the academy, the university art departments. I'm at odds with their philosophy department. And ask me if I care. No, I care about them, but and you can ask me, well, what gives you such arrogance that you have the nerve? Well, the answer is I'm not the only one who thinks this, okay? So I can look at 100 books that agree with me and 100 books that disagree with me, and then my job is to say, which of the 2 piles of books made the most cogent argument? You see what I mean? So it's not me against the world, it's me taking sides in an argument that has been going on for centuries, all right? And I'm just about done with ranting. I really say this has not been a rant. I will defend myself. This has been a lecture. And I hope that somebody who wants to hear it will find it at some point and find it helpful. All right, I'm just about ready to stop broadcasting. What I'm doing right now is with a fairly small brush, in glazing terms, it's a small brush. I'm doing little bits of color, like small areas of glazing. So if there is anybody new watching, or later on you watch this, and you haven't been on my channel before or very often before, let me take the same topic that I've just been talking about ad nauseum. I hope it's not literally ad nauseum, and use some of the other descriptors and terminology I've used. I say that the ideal art journey, let's just refer to painting in this case, the ideal painting journey, this is the ideal, not the real for everybody, but and I say this mostly for any young people that may happen to stumble on this broadcast anytime. The ideal art journey is you spend the first half of your art journey, these halves are not equal, like hockey. You spend the first, which has 3 halves, you spend the first half of your art journey learning to paint stuff that looks like stuff. There's actually a website out there, I think, painting stuff that looks like stuff. I think that's a hilarious and very clever title for a website, for an artist. So you spend the first half of your journey learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. You got to paint people that look like people, hands that look like hands, desk perspective, everything. You got to paint a chubby middle-aged piano teacher sitting at a piano. You got to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Then you spend the second half. Not everybody makes it in the second half. Some people stay in the first half, and that's their business. Some people make a lot of money and have a lot of success and fame and satisfaction. Good for them, good for them, good for them. But most artists jump into the second half and they realize it's not about faithfully copying, rendering accurately a thing. First half, paint stuff that looks like stuff. Second half, paint stuff that looks like paint. In other words, the abstract. So that's clearly, and for me, it was a real immediate change. 2004, summer of 16 years ago, when I started oil painting. And I've told that story before. I'll tell it another time, not right now. But you can clearly see, number one, I hope you can clearly see, well, doggone, he's a pretty good drawer. See, I can draw an MC over here leaning over with the hand in his pocket and there's a microphone in his hand. I can draw blah, 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 blah. You name it, right? I can draw it. But if you're in the first half of your journey, you're saying, yeah, but I don't understand, why does he do it so messy? Okay? The answer is because the real beauty of the painting consists in play of light, values, fascinating colors. In fact, no. Let me say what is more important than color is texture. What's more important than texture is value. So values, number one, light and dark, especially the way I've arranged the light and dark, which is real. You can see, there's your eye goes there. Values, texture. There's tons of texture. Now you can't see it very well on that camera, and then thirdly, color. Then there's interesting shapes. Then there's interesting line, lots of interesting line, and the pencil in my case is very, very, very instrumental. And there's hard edges and soft edges, there's tension, there's balance, and so on. And it's all those things. If this is a beautiful painting, which I sure hope it's going to be, because somebody's paying me good money for it, it is those abstract elements that make it a beautiful painting. Oh, and by the way, if the drawing is off, I get kicked out of the game. So there's the bad news. If you do realism and you screw it up, like you try to do people, but their legs are too long or short, their arms are too long or short, and I'm not saying that these are actually perfect, it could be, and then I've still got some time to make corrections. But just the principle that if you try to do accurate realism and you miss, the viewer is very disturbed by that. Anyway. Whew! Well, that was something, wasn't it? Let me see what else you guys are saying. Oh, very good, Mystery Secrets. That's wonderful. Glad to hear it. Rembrandt, he worked to be, got it right no matter how long it took. Yeah, that's interesting. That's good. Hi, Deontay Araby. That's you. Good. Glad to hear it. I hope that's a good. That's me. Uncle, the acrylic first thing can make it hard to fix things once you go to oil? Maybe. The acrylic first thing can make it hard to fix things. Oh, yes, 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 you're correct. That is correct. Once you go to oil, you don't have quite the flexibility, the ease of making corrections. You're exactly correct. You want to try to get things right in the acrylic stage. That's why I said that's how when's the time to go to oil? When the drawing is nearly correct, very close to perfect, when the color and the values are those three things, color, value, and drawing is nearly perfect, then I can go to oil. Try not to do that until those three things are in place. Hello, Brenda. Midnight there. Good, hope you can enjoy it tomorrow. Thanks for watching. All right, let me tell you where I'm going with this painting then, which I'll do some on my own without your company. Thank you very much. The next thing I'm going to do is the fuzz layer, which is glow. There's already a lot of glow happening in this painting, so I'm hoping and thinking that I don't have to do a ton of glow. Then I'm going to do dark details, probably both in pencil. That's these crazy jumbo jet black made by Jerry's Artorama. Okay, kind of like a Conti crayon in a pencil form, a little bit like a grease pencil, not as greasy as anyway. So fuzz, which means light, transparent, soft layers, translucent, light, translucent, soft edges, some fuzz, glow, atmosphere. Then I'm going to do some drawing with pencils and small brushes, and then I'm going to do the final edit layer. I will come back and probably broadcast, I hope later on today when I'm doing the final edit layer, which is the fussiest, the most labor intensive of all the layers. Okay? And then after final edit, it's glazes in between, broken color, and sparkle. And I'm done. That'll be tomorrow sometime, if I'm lucky. All right, been fun. Again, if you want to make a good comment, I will look forward to reading it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.